All right, let's talk about something that pops up in Indonesia every few years and, let's be honest, kind of freaks everyone out. This whole idea of chopping a few zeros off the rupiah. What's really going on here? We're going to separate the facts from the fiction. Okay, let's just get the biggest fear out on the table right away. Is your money about to become worthless? I mean, that's what we all think, right? The government talks about changing the currency and you immediately picture your savings just poof, gone. So is that what this is all about? Let's dig in. Almost all the confusion, all that fear, it really comes down to two words that sound kind of similar but are worlds apart: redenomination and sandering. And trust me, getting the difference between these two is the key to unlocking this whole thing. All right, so let's do it. Let's break down this tale of two policies. We're going to look at what each one actually is. I promise by the end of this, you'll see why mixing them up is a huge mistake. Okay, first up, let's talk about the scary one, sandering. This is the real deal. It's a painful, drastic move that governments only pull out when the economy is in total freefall. We're talking hyperinflation chaos. Sandering doesn't just cut the zeros on the bill, it cuts the actual value. So one day your money buys a loaf of bread, the next day, maybe half a loaf. And yeah, there's a reason this fear is so deep in Indonesia. It actually happened back in 1959. That memory is long. Now, let's flip the coin and look at redenomination. This is what's actually on the table today, and it's totally different. Think of it like a cosmetic change, a simple bit of accounting. It's just about making the number simpler by lopping off some zeros. The key thing, and I can't stress this enough, is that it does not change the real value or the purchasing power of your money. Not one bit. And look, this table just lays it all out. Crystal clear. Yeah, okay, both of them reduce the number on the banknote. But check out that second row. That's the one that really, really matters. With redenomination, your purchasing power stays exactly the same. No change. But with sandering, damn, it gets hammered. They happen in totally different situations, one in stability, one in crisis, for completely opposite reasons. All right, so cosmetic change sounds nice, but what does it actually look like? In the real world, in your wallet, when you're buying a coffee. Let's walk through a super simple example. Okay, so let's say you've got this classic 100,000 rupiah bill in your hand. We all know this one. Now, after the redenomination happens, we just slice off those 3 zeros at the end. It now becomes a 100 rupiah bill. Simple, right? But here's the million-dollar question. Or, I guess, the 100 rupiah question. What can you buy with it? The answer is exactly the same stuff. The actual value, what it gets you, hasn't changed one bit. All that's changed is you don't have to count so many zeros. So that kind of begs the question, right? If it doesn't actually make us any richer, why on earth would you go through all this hassle? Well, it turns out there are some pretty solid, practical reasons for giving the currency this kind of makeover. And the benefits really fall into two big buckets. On one hand, you've got some major improvements in just technical efficiency. And on the other hand, there's this really interesting psychological boost it gives the currency's reputation around the world. So on the technical side, it's pretty straightforward. Fewer zeros just makes life easier, right? Accounting gets simpler, there's less chance of someone making a typo, a costly typo. But, and this is a big one, it's also a huge upgrade for the country's digital plumbing. A lot of IT systems, banking software, they literally start to choke when they have to deal with numbers in the trillions. So getting rid of those extra digits is actually super important to make sure Indonesia's booming digital economy doesn't hit a wall. Then there's the psychological part, which is all about perception. I mean, think about it. An exchange rate of, say, 15,000 rupiah to $1. It just sounds a bit weak, doesn't it? But what about 15 rupiah to the dollar? Now that sounds way more solid, more credible. And that simple change in perception can actually boost confidence for everyone, from international investors to folks right at home. Okay, now we've got to talk about the biggest myth, the one that causes so much confusion, this idea that redenomination is some kind of magic bullet for fighting inflation. Let me just be as clear as I can possibly be on this one. Redenomination has absolutely zero, pardon the pun, zero impact on the real causes of inflation. It just can't fix it. Remember, it's a cosmetic change. It doesn't touch the deep economic engines that actually make prices go up. Look, real inflation happens because of big stuff, right? like way too much money chasing way too few goods. Or the cost of making things goes through the roof. Or the central bank is just pumping too much cash into the system. Just changing the numbers printed on the money? That doesn't do a thing to solve any of those fundamental problems. So here's the bottom line. When a central bank really wants to fight inflation, it pulls out the big guns. We're talking about raising interest rates. That makes it more expensive for people and businesses to borrow money, which makes them spend less, and that cools down the whole economy. That's a real economic tool. It's not just slapping a new label on the can.
Okay, so with all that said, even though redenomination itself isn't dangerous, the process of switching over, well, it does have a few hidden dangers, some real psychological traps that have to be managed really, really carefully. The first one is something psychologists call money illusion. It's basically a trick our brains play on us. A price tag of, let's say, 7 new rupiah just feels way cheaper than 7,000 old rupiah, doesn't it? Even though they buy the exact same thing. And that feeling can trick us into spending more, which, if a lot of people do it, could actually stir up a bit of inflation.
And the other big risk, it's all about rounding. Okay, imagine something costs, I don't know, 14,850 rupiah.
After you lop off the zeros, its new price is 14.85. Kinda awkward, right? So what do you think a shop owner is gonna do for the sake of simplicity? You got it. They're probably just gonna round it up to a nice clean 15. Now that little bit of rounding doesn't seem like much for one item, but imagine that happening with millions of products and services all across the country. Suddenly, you've got real, creeping inflation on your hands. So when you weigh the benefits against these risks, what's the final call? What's the perfect moment to actually pull the trigger on something like this? Well, for this to be a success, it really comes down to 3 key things. First, and this is non-negotiable, the economy has to be stable already, with inflation totally under control. Second, the government and the central bank need to be working together perfectly, like a well-oiled machine. And third, and this might be the most important part, you need a massive, clear public education campaign so that nobody panics and everyone understands what's happening. You have to manage those psychological risks. And that really brings us to the single most important takeaway from all of this. Redenomination isn't some kind of medicine you give a sick economy to make it better. It's more like a diploma, a certificate you get once the economy is already healthy and stable. It's a sign that you've already succeeded, not a tool you use to succeed. So the next time this whole plan comes up, the real question you should be asking isn't, is this going to wreck my savings? The real question is our economy strong and stable enough to have earned this?